And Freddie Daniel told a Division B meeting last fall, a very 45 minutes, he will tell us just, I think, something from the end. I think that is not only a good speech, it is a great speech. Because I remember it now, after so many months, so well, and I absorbed also the conclusion so well. So let's hear him.
Eventually I made it. The dramatist John Ford, in the 16th century, the English dramatist, said, "You can speak well if your tongue can deliver the message of your heart." Fellow Toastmasters, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, when you stand up to speak, do you just speak, or do you speak the message of your heart? In July 2011, I was in Las Vegas, and at the World Toastmasters World Convention. And at the World Convention, one of the great things that happens is they have the semi-finals and the final of the World Championship of Public Speaking. That World Championship starts right in your club. When you do your international speech entry, that is the first starting point. And it passes through areas, divisions, districts, and finally reaches the World Convention final. Can you imagine what it's like to be crowned the world champion of public speaking? It is opening you to a whole future of being paid potentially thousands of pounds to be training or to be speaking on stage. But can you also imagine what it's like having to do a semi-final on Thursday, and then just 36 hours later, you have to do the final speech. But it has to be a different speech than the one you delivered on the Thursday. Now, I'd gone to Las Vegas, and I was there to support Malachi Talabi, who was our champion that year. Malachi performed in his semi-final. He did brilliantly. He came third. Unfortunately, not good enough to reach the final. On the Friday, he grabs me and he takes me aside and he says, "Listen, come with me, come with me. We're going to go and do some coaching for one of the finalists, a lady called Olivia Schofield, who I'd never met. She's brilliant, and I know you'll have some great value to bring." We walk in the door, and I remember there was Olivia on stage, already practicing her speech, and there are 12 people all arced around her. I looked around the room, and there were world champions, world semi-finalists, people who'd flown from Europe, which is where Olivia was from, specially to coach her, and me. It was a little bit daunting. Olivia started her speech. Woof, woof, woof. No, I wasn't calling my dog. I was calling my sister, Ruth. And the speech unfolded, and it was about how she had been born with a speech impediment and had over time overcome that problem in her life, and what she had learned from it and what we could take from it as well. I sat in that audience, I sat there for an hour, and I didn't say a word. But I looked at my watch at one stage, and I suddenly thought, I'm going to have to leave in a few moments. And I have got 3 things in particular that I would like to share with Olivia. So when a moment came up, I put my hand up and I let forth, and I told them the things that I thought were important. A little bit of silence went around the room as people tried to suss out who this imposter was. But Olivia listened, and she said, "You know what? I like those ideas. I'm going to put them into the speech." I left the room, and that was the last I saw of Olivia until the next day, which was at the World Championship Finals. Olivia, having spoken in the room, had taken 6 minutes and 50 seconds to do her speech. But when she did it on the stage in the finals, she took 7 minutes and 47 seconds. That was over the time that was allowed, and she was disqualified. Can you imagine that? You've done your club, your area, your division, your district. You've flown, you've paid to go to Las Vegas to perform the semi-finals, you win it, and then you go overtime in the final. When the contest was over, we streamed out of this room, and there was a huge room in front of us. And all down this wall here were little booths where all of the finalists were stood. And the very first one was Olivia. And around all of the finalists, there were press, and there were hundreds of people wanting to talk to them and have their photo taken with them, etc. And as I went past Olivia, she suddenly stopped. And she said to people, excuse me. And she pushed her way through the crowd and came over to me and she said, Freddie, I really just wanted to say, we didn't get a chance to introduce ourselves properly yesterday, but I really appreciated the advice you gave me. It made a major difference to my speech. I was like, oh God, Olivia, I'm so sorry about going over time. And she said, no, don't worry. She said if I'd been over 1 or 2 seconds, I'd have been totally gutted. But the fact I was over 17, I might as well carried on for another 5 minutes. So I left the room. But about half an hour later, I came back into the room. And this time Olivia was coming towards me. And she had 2 friends either side. And it was a bit different, the picture this time, because instead of being upbeat, she was crying. I went over to her, put my arm around her, and I said, what can you say? But I said, listen, it'll be okay. It feels bad at the moment, but the moment will pass. She said to me, no, you don't understand. I've just had a frail old lady who's come up to me. Somebody who has had a speech impediment their entire life. Somebody who's been scared to get anything done about that speech impediment. And having heard my speech, she says she now feels she has the courage to go and see somebody to do something about it. I made a difference to somebody's life. That's why I'm crying. That day, Olivia learned something, and I learned something about public speaking. And that is that public speaking is not about the trophy, it is about making a difference in somebody's life. It is about taking that message from your heart and delivering it to people to make a difference. There's a couple of quotes that I came across. Jim Key, the 2003 world champion, interestingly, came to our conference in Windsor, and I always remember him saying, he said that in 2001, he came 3rd in the World Championship of Public Speaking. 2002, he came 2nd in the World Championship of Public Speaking, and finally won it in 2003. And the one thing he said that made the difference was stopping trying to win the trophy and instead trying to help someone in the audience. Lashonda Rundles, who's the 2008 champion, the quote she had was, "The individual lives that I have touched are something that I treasure more than the trophy." Mark Brown, the 1995 world champion of public speaking, said, "Bring yourself, your experience, your voice, your life, and your message to the forefront. Strive to leave the audience with something of value, and the rest will come." The only reason to speak is to change the world. And we do that through making people think something different, feel something different, or do something different. Judy said earlier that we don't just speak to audiences as a mass, but we speak to people individually in that audience. Someone in that audience needs to hear the message of your heart. Someone in that audience needs to hear your story. Someone in that audience needs to be inspired by each and every one of you. This is why you should learn to speak in public. Indeed, this is the only reason to speak in public at all. Thank you.
So I knew that Freddie will give us an example of a great speech, and he did.